in Ukhrul, Manipur. She is currently engaged as a lecturer at Sentinel College, Ukhrul, Department of English. She is also a published author with keen interest in preserving the stories of her people. Please take your time. Thank you.
Which will be a storytelling session by Dr.Visier Sanyü. He's a man who needs no more introduction today. For all I can say, we are honored to have one of the only, or I could say that he's the only irreplaceable intellects here today among us. I would request him to join us today, to join me in the podium today, now, so that we can start our storytelling session. It's very apt that we have a storytelling session today because we are nothing without stories. And Nagas, we live in our stories, we live in our songs. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie once said that there is a huge danger to a single story, and which is why the colonized people have to change our narratives through our side of the story. So we are honored to have Dr. Visier to share us his experiences, being a person who has lived in the past in our old ways, and also being a person who has lived the best of his life in the new Naga way. So sir, please join us. After his storytelling session, we will have a short interaction, so the time will be open for question and answer round.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. Time to hear my own story after that. Yeah, okay. Oh my God, the light. Having lived a longish life, the story that I'm going to tell you is some of your parents were not born. So you can think that this is almost a prehistoric man telling his story, okay? Stories are the most important tools for building a person, a people, and a nation. In the past, when we were in school, we were told that nations go to war for food and territory. In other words, for economic reasons and for politics. But now, as you know, Professor Yuval Harari is saying that is not true. People go to war because of stories they tell. And he says a very interesting story, example of a rock in Jerusalem. He said there's a rock in Jerusalem, it's just like an ordinary rock you can find anywhere, and Jerusalem is an ordinary city, like any cities, but the story of that rock has three different versions. The Christian story, Muslim story, and the Jew story. The Christian believe that that's where Jesus rose up from the dead. The Muslim believe that that is where Muhammad went to heaven or whatever, ascend to heaven. And for the Jews, it's the most sacred stone for them because that's where Abraham came. And that's the stone of Abraham. So unless they solve the story of this rock, they'll continue to go to war. And as you know, what is happening in Manipur is because there are three stories in Manipur: the Naga story, the Kuki story, and the Meitei story. And unless they find the truth, they'll continue to fight because they all have their own stories and they all believe in the stories. The only conclusion would be one ethnic group will wipe out the other two and then believe his own story, which will not happen. Or they come to a conclusion, do research and said, this is the true story of Manipur. They'll continue. Now, enough of that. I'll tell you a little bit of my story in the beginning, and we can interact on that. When I was about 6, our family was non-Christian. We were not Christian. I became Christian when I was about 20. So we were performing these Sakrangi rituals, and I was training to become a warrior, and horrible things you said, my enemies will be drowsy, and I will pierce his heart with my spear. I'll kill him and whatever, and I'll live till the next year. And you strangle a chicken. So these are things I was practicing as a child of 6. Then one day we went to the forest, to our field, and we were cultivating jum in a jum field. And we were working on that. And then suddenly a woman came from the mountain crying and weeping and screaming and said, Teyu Tisakre, Tisakre. You know who Tisakre is? Anybody? Anybody who knows Tisakre? Tisakre, the ideologue of the Naga national movement, has been killed, shot, and his body is writhing. So my mother belongs to his clan, so we all got numb. And my mother started crying, and we didn't know how to do. So we were staying there. Then another clan woman came and said, what are you doing here? Go home. Our leader, Ukratamia, our leader has been killed. Go home. So we went home, and my mother had to go to the funeral, and I didn't sleep that night because I was so scared of something was happening, a child of 6. Then after, it's very vague memory because I was about 6. Then after that I went to school in the village, but I did not wear a pant. I had a kind of a t-shirt that covers a little bit of the private parts. I didn't have a pant. And some of them had pants, especially from the Christian families. So one of them made fun of me, and they said, oh, there's something hanging between your two thighs, a caterpillar. So I said, oh, but many of us were like that. So I went and told my brother, I said, okay, it's so fine, we'll make a pant for you. So during the Second World War, the British passed through our village, and we fed them, and one of them gave his coat to my father. My father was a Gambura. So that coat was hanging because nobody can wear that coat. So my brother cut that coat and make a pant. So the arm became my thing. And it was very itchy because it was a woolen, English woolen coat. That's what I remember as a child. Then the next thing I remember was the Sikh regiment, I thought, but it could be the 16th Punjab regiment. The army came and burned our village. So the whole village has to run to the mountain. And we went to Zuku first, thousands of us, and we carried rice, vegetables, dry meat, dry fish, anything that we carried, coins, all the money that we had, and we ran to the jungle because our village was burned. We lived there for a few months, and thousands of us, maybe 1,000 in one valley. So they said it is too dangerous to live like this. Anytime the Indian army can come up. So they said we'll divide. So we dispersed into different directions. And I remember some families went to Manipur, some families went down to the Mezipama side, and we went to the Ziliang country in the mountain. So for 3 years, we moved from mountain to mountain, from stream to stream. And we were mostly starving. the way we were surviving was with my parents and my brothers and sisters who were older. They went for fishing in the rivers. We went for hunting. We learned how to trap birds and collect food. And then the older people will go to the Ziliang villages and buy rice at night where the army is not there. So that's how we were surviving. And two incidents of the jungle time were very, very, very vivid. We were walking and walking and walking. We found a stream, and evening, about 4 o'clock or so, we rested. We make a little thatch hut, and we cooked something, and we were about to eat. Then my mother went to sleep, dozed off, and she woke up. And she said, I dreamt of my aunt, who's been dead for many years. And in my dream, she told me that we should move on. She said, this place is not clean. This is not a holy place. Evil spirits are in this land, so we must move. So my father and my brothers, they all said, no, there's no evil spirit. We're too tired, we can't go. No, we're too tired. But my mother insisted that we should move. So we moved another kilometer up the mountain, and we slept in the forest. This strange thing about the spirit is that months later, the villagers, the Ziliang villagers came and said, you know, the army reached your camp after you left. So that is a mystery that I never understood. Of course, in my mother's mind, her aunt has to tell her, in her mind, the place was unholy. But what was guiding us was that we were saved from a very big danger. To cut the long story short, we were starving. We could trap, but there was no more food. And then something happened. There was a deputy commissioner in Kohima called Rashid Yusuf Ali. He was the most colorful administrator. He was a colonel in the Indian Army, in the British Army. During the Second World, he was a captain. He chased back the Japanese to Rangoon, and when Piso was in prison in 1944, just after the war, he went and visited Piso, this colorful administrator. To cut the long story short, he became the DC of Kohima in 1950s, and married a village girl, a woman from our village, and became part of us. Later, he became the chief secretary of Arunachal, and his father was a very good friend of Nehru, and Nehru likes him very much as a young officer. So when he was in DC, he went to the northern Angami area where there were undergrounds, and he said to the Dubashi, show me an underground camp, I won't arrest him. So he went to the village, and if I'm not mistaken, that village, I think, is Nagaland. He saw children and women starving in camp. And he said, this is wrong. So he sent a message to Nehru and said, we must give, what do you call that term? That you forgive. Yeah, my God, I'm getting old. Anyway, what is that term called? You forgive them and you tell them to come. Oh my God, I'm trying to, amnesty, kind of amnesty. But this is amnesty, but there was another one. Anyway, we must give them amnesty for them to return. And we will not punish them. We will give them ration. So Nehru agreed. So he sent messages to the jungle, the jungle telegraph. So word, so it reached our camp. And then the Ziliang Devashi came and said, DC has given order, you can surrender and you'll not go to jail, but you'll get ration. So we walk and we walk, and we came to what is now called Heningkulung. And although I was a child, I very vividly remember, because we came at night, the Ziliang people hosted us, they cooked chicken for us coming from the jungle. And then my brother, who has read up to class 10, I thought he knew everything. I thought his English was very good. So he read up to class 10, he can speak some broken English. So he went up to the captain, who was playing some badminton with shorts and white dress, and said, good morning, sir, we are the undergrounds. We have come to surrender because we have received message that we have been given amnesty and that we will be looked after. And the captain looked at him and said, if you want independent, go back to the jungle. So my brother didn't know what to do. Then the major came up from the room and said, no, come here, idhar. And then he explained, all those who surrendered will be provided transport to Gaspani, where there is a village gathering, village grouping, where all the undergrounds are put in one camp. And nowadays, the historians prefer to call it a concentration camp, but it's wrong to say that. Because when you use the concentration camp, people immediately think of Holocaust. And it is not as bad as Holocaust. So we were put in village grouping, and from Mezipema, Gaspani, we traveled back to Kohima, then went back to our village, and my brother even remembers the date, and the day that we surrendered to Yusuf Ali, and etc. But of course, I was too young to remember that. But in this misery, there's always a twist in history, in the storytelling. Kohima, we were staying in a horse stable. The last British deputy commissioner was a man called Charles Pawsey. He left in 1944 or 45 after independence. I think he left in 1945. When he was leaving, he gave his horse stable, his horse house hut, to my uncle and a clan uncle, who was his gardener. So he used to go and plant the flower, clean the house, and also he said, I'm going back to England, you take this house. This is for my horse, there will not be more horse. So that was a stable, and we lived in that one. And the interesting thing was, they were full of Japanese weapons, because it was not very long after the war. So there were guns, there were swords, there were boxes, everything, so we used to play with them. Now, here's the juicy part of it. Our neighbor was Reverend Wati Ayer's family. His father was an officer of the education department, and he became the director of the department, and they were living in the official residence, and we were in a stable. And we were the underground, Naga, hostile, anti-nationalists, and they were the government people. Clean dress, uniform, big house, so a bit nervous. But what happened was, Wati's mother used to cook meat and send it to us. So every Christmas, every occasion, she'll cook a big pot of meat full of waters, and we used to call our curry, and send it to us because she saw we were starving. I mean, we were not really starving by then, but we were very poor. My father used to go to Impal, bring dry fish, and my sister and I used to sell on the street. My sister was a little grown up, so she was very shy, especially when our villagers passed by. But I was very excited to be selling fish on the road, dry fish on the road. That's how life started. Then, Wati used to play a trumpet from his window. And every night I used to hear that. And I said to my sister, who is my guru, I said, I want to buy one of those. And I always remembered her sentence. That is for Kejame, not for us. Kejame in Agame is literally big people, but it means officers. So those are for officers' children, not for us. So I used to be a little jealous of Wati. He was a few years older than me, very smart, uniform, very stylish as usual. And we were in half pen. So I was a bit jealous of that. Now, to jump 60 years thing or 40 years by strange coincidence of nature, of our life and so forth, I got my PhD. I became a head of the history department like Tia Toshi, the professor this morning. I was the first head, and then I went overseas and I lived in Australia for 22 years, and all that disappeared. That I was somewhat inferior to Wati, completely disappeared. Because education can do something wonder in your life. So having an education like him, I mean, I'm not as educated as him, but having some education, now no more problem of jealousy, and I don't need a trumpet anymore. But after 22 years, I came back to Nagaland. And then I was totally lost. I was in Australia for 22 years. I taught in 2 universities, and I worked with National Council of Churches. I worked with World Vision, and I worked with this and that, blah, 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 blah. And then I was going to be 60. And I said, my God, I don't want to die in Australia. I want to go back. But after many years in Australia, and your children are typical Australian, can't speak Hindi or anything, and your friends are all Australian, it's going to be a very difficult decision. So I said, what shall I do? So for 3 years, I struggled. And then one day, I read a book, and it says, those of you Asians who are trying to go back to your country, you must be clear with 3 things. Why he's saying is that many Asians, they go to Australia and they said, oh, we'll get rich and go back, okay? First of all, they don't get rich because it's very hard to get rich in Australia. Number 2, when they go back, it's not the same country that they left. It's another country. So my friend, Momon Tong from Burma, became a very rich engineer in Australia, and he retired. He said, I'm going back to Burma to help my people. And he went there, and 1 year he lasted, he came back. Oh, yeah. It's so dirty, it's so corrupt, Burma. I can't live there, so he came back. So I don't want to be like him. I don't want to come to Nagaland and say it's so dirty, so corrupt, and I don't want to go back. Which is true, anyway. So I thought about it. Then the book says, we must be clear with 3 things. You must admit your mistakes. You must be able to forgive. You must have a clear goal why you want to go back. Now the 2 are very easy. Yeah, mistake you can admit any day. Forgive, though you can forgive 77 times. But to have a clear goal, what to do in Nagaland is very difficult. Because I came for a visit, so many things came up. Some people want me to join politics, some people thought I'll join the Konama church, some people say you should repay your grandfather's house, your father's house, your blah, 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 blah. So I said too many confusing things. So I thought for 3 years. And then at the end of it, I said, I have a land in Mazipema. I'll go back and start a healing garden where people can come, a safe space so people can come and have interaction, discussion, and talk, retreat, play, game, extra. And it is happening. Only last month, the NBCC women secretaries came and spent the whole afternoon. Then last week, The Ringma women pastors came and feasted the whole day and had so much food, they couldn't finish it, so they gave me a lot of food, and we had interaction. So it is serving the purpose of what I dreamed in Australia. But the point I'm coming is, when I came back, I found out what he was a great man. He was doing this, he was this principle, you have done this, you have FNR. And I said, my God, my friend has done so much when I'm away. I'm nobody. I can't help my people like him. I don't have the qualification and the skills that he has. So I said, I feel very sad that I cannot do something like him. Then one morning I got up and have very clear thought and said, you make Wati a greater man than you are. You will help him to become a great man. You will help him to become what he is meant to become. When I thought about that, I completely became a free man. There was no more inferiority complex. There was no more, oh, he has done that, but I have not done that. Or the more he is dead, but I'm not like that. My aim was to help him. And as a great man, what he is, we are all human. He makes mistakes, strangely enough. And he makes some big mistakes. And people attack him or criticize him on social media. And every time they do that, I either go and see them or I send them a message privately and say, this is wrong. I know him. I know this man for 60 years, and what he's trying to do is he's trying to help our people. Only last week, somebody said, what he has been misled by, she's saying 5 minutes more, but I'm going to take only 4 minutes. You see, I'm very generous. Very generous man. So, what he has been misled, and he is supporting the cookies in social media, and so forth. I said, I contacted him, look, he is not supporting cookies, he is not supporting the Métis, he is not supporting the Naga, he is trying to bring peace. That is his work. He may have given 20 rice back to the cookie refugees, but that is not his rice also. Somebody else gave it to him, FNR to hand it over to him. That does not mean you have gone to the cookie side or the Métis side. So, having learned that lesson, with this very messy, long story, my intake, the lesson I have learned is, if you live for somebody else, and if you live for someone to become what they are meant to be, and if you make them somebody who is greater than you are, then you become a free man, and that's where we can start. Because our stories are different. Your stories are very different from my story, and your differences are so very, very unique. But you have not been able to tell the story due to lack of training or skill, but we must all tell our story. And with this brief story of our spanning about 60 years in 20 minutes, I hope you will have some inspiration, some curiosity, some question, and some anger. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. For those of you, have all of us read this book? Is there anyone who hasn't read it yet? So yeah, it's there at the back. Please grab a copy. This book, it is not a book that just talks about a person's journey. It is a book that talks about the journey of Naga as a whole. So he talks about the old ways of our life. Then he talks about how he transitioned into it. So in the book, he questions the religious faith, the new religious faith, Christianity. Then he also questioned the traditional values that we have had. He also talks a lot on healing process. I actually like the story that on Kolezo Chase. Chase, yeah, the forgiveness, a story on forgiveness. So this book, it talks about how we as a Naga community have evolved. So I hope that you will be able to give him reasonable questions and learn a lot from his life experiences. So the floor is open for question and answer.
Check. Thank you for this time. I have one question. We understand